you know, every time it's come up and had something else that I haven't been able to attend. So I'm able to, to be here tonight.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Holly.
Really, we
anything I can do to help.
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk after this meeting. I'll set up some time to speak to you.
Great.
Hi, Janet. How are you? Well, we have a great
Holly. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So we like to keep our quarterly information meetings. My grace, Scott. It's like a big family here. It is. So we like to keep our meetings. We will end right at 9. We're going to be pop, 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 pop. So we're going to start and let people keep coming in. Hi, Russ. It's good to see you. I wanted to let you know that you're actually on first before the rabbi.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Did you get my email about 10 minutes if you want? Take 10?
Well, I have a specific thing. A couple things that I want to check in with everybody about, and hopefully it'll be 10 minutes will be more than enough time, and I'll be able to give you guys a few minutes back because I know everybody's got a lot of key information to share.
All right. Thank you so much, Russ. So I want to welcome all of you tonight. I'm thrilled that you're here to WJCI's first quarterly meeting of 2022. As an organization, WJCI has recently expanded its mission. And so we want to spend some time telling you about that later in the session. It'll be after our speakers. And this meeting is also a forum for all of you to hear about immigration issues, both in and outside of our community. So you're going to hear from some pretty amazing speakers tonight. And then we'll tell you about our expanded mission. And with that, I'd like to introduce a few new and old EC members that are here. We have Marty Michael, Laura Lewis, Amy Ecker, Amy Beth, Andrea, right? Did I see Andrea? Yes. And Ruth?
Hi.
There you are. And Howard, a long time.
Hi, everyone.
Long time.
It's a pleasure seeing everybody at these meetings.
I only have one page on the screen. I think I got everyone. I hope so. Anyway, I want to remind everyone to mute yourself. We are recording this event tonight because there's so much useful information that we hope that you'll share it with your friends and colleagues and everyone else. Please feel free to drop your name and community in the chat box and write your email or and if you would like to receive our newsletter so we can get that out to you. We have a new and improved newsletter. I hope you guys have seen it. It's got lots of useful information. So with that, I would like to introduce, we're going to move things around tonight because our rabbi Devar tour portion will be a little bit late. We have a special guest and I will let you be surprised. We had a change in plans and so the special guests coming. I would like to kick off with Russ Agdern, my good friend, and I'll call you my colleague from HIAS for an advocacy update.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Holly. It's great to see everybody. The grassroots campaign manager for HIAS. For those of you new to the call, I'm always excited to say that I grew up in your midst in Tarrytown at Temple Beth Abraham in Tarrytown. And it's always a real pleasure to get to work with leaders from where I grew up. So and to see the incredible work that everyone is doing. Holly, if you can make it so I could share, can I share my, see if I can share my screen. If you could make it so I could share my screen, that'd be great. And if that's not doable, I don't need it. It's just, I wanted to give folks a visual too. But I let you know a little late in the game, so that's on me.
It's quite all right. Amy, can we do that? I'm not, it's not looking like I can. You're on mute.
Working on it, we can see it.
Russ, the other option is you could email it to me very quickly.
Nope,
if you want.
All right. Oh, I'm highlighted, I'm spotlit, but I think you need to make me a host or a co-host for me to be able to share screen. It's all right. I don't want to, it's all right. Let me keep going.
Okay.
Quite all right.
You're welcome to email it to us. Sorry, Russ, if you like.
For sure. It's mostly just so folks get the ideas. What I wanted to talk to everybody about is HIAS. We're building sort of a season of action around advocacy over the first few months of 2022. We're at a really key moment. I think the clock is ticking on this particular Congress, as I think everybody is aware. And given sort of the general, given the current situation in the country, it really feels critical to try to get as much done as we can with this Congress. And so I wanted to just highlight one big thing we are doing very soon and focusing on a lot of energy on right now. And then talk about two more briefly, two other key things we are doing. Okay.
Russ,
so,
you're actually co-host. Excuse me. You
all
are
right,
co-host now.
let's see if I can.
Yeah. Try it.
Hey, there we are.
Good.
All right. So spring, it says 2021, not 2022. For that, I am sorry. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing the beginning of this year a little bit like a real continuation of 2021. I'm a little off kilter in part because I was quarantined away from my family for a few days. So this is the season. So I first want to talk to everybody about February 8th, which is we're doing a national call-in day of action on the Afghan Adjustment Act. I want to talk to you a little bit about what that is and why it is so important. I want to talk to you a little bit about what that is and why. Awesome, thank you. So what is the Afghan Adjustment Act? So the Afghan Adjustment Act is a piece of legislation that will basically make it significantly easier for the Afghans that were evacuated here from Afghanistan to get permanent status. It is modeled off of the basic ideas of the Cuban Adjustment Act. It really is a very critical piece of legislation. You may ask why. So most of the Afghans that came here, and I know that, I know Westchester leaders, many of you have been so involved in this work, and we're really involved in trying to push the Biden administration a lot earlier than they acted to act. I'm very well aware of that. So some of you probably already know this. For those of you that do, I just want to give a refresher to the folks that don't. All right, so the Afghan Adjustment Act the goal of it is to make it so it is much easier for the Afghans who were brought here to get permanent status and to be able to be citizens eventually. Why is that so important? So most of the Afghans brought here were brought here under a terrible sounding category of status called humanitarian parole. When they were brought here, very often they were coming with literally the clothing on their backs. For the folks that actually did what they were asked by the embassy and brought their paperwork, a lot of those folks lost their paperwork in the embassy when there's a standard embassy procedure to burn all the files as you're leaving, as Kabul was falling. That was what happened. Other folks lost their papers because they were, trying to evade the Taliban as they were working to get to the airport. So folks came to this country under humanitarian parole. A lot of them did not have any sort of paperwork, and they're working with the State Department now. They have less than 2 years from the date that they arrived here to have humanitarian parole status. After 2 years, that expires. Once that expires, there's no direct path for folks that are here under humanitarian parole to become to get permanent status, to become citizens. There's no direct way as it stands right now. So what that means is a lot of these people will, if we don't do something, right, a lot of these people are going to have to go through a really complex, really expensive process that probably involves claiming asylum, that potentially involves going through immigration courts. And for folks that aren't following up, on this asylum situation in the immigration courts, there is a significant backlog that is hundreds of thousands of people long. So this is a real problem. Right? This is a real problem that this doesn't exist. There is an easy solution, or an easier solution, which is to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act to make that path much more direct and much more clear. So how does this impact us and our work? So I know that a lot of people have been involved, whether your congregation is working to resettle Afghans, whether you're raising materials to support them, whatever you're doing, know that if we don't get the Afghan Adjustment Act passed, your work in supporting those folks is going to get a lot more complicated. And we may not be able to actually have these Afghans be able to call the United States their home. So I know, Holly and others, and a lot of you and other people have done really Herculean work across the country to like welcome folks on their first steps in this journey. But to make it so those steps aren't wiped away, we need to do something to make sure these folks can have permanent status. So why February 8th is as the date? It seems kind of arbitrary, a random Tuesday in February. Well, it's not a random Tuesday. It's actually 10 days before the current budget resolution expires in the federal government. And our colleagues and allies that do advocacy work with Congress think that this, and some of my colleagues on the HIAS team, think that the continuing resolution and pushing to have the Afghan Adjustment Act included in the continuing resolution is the best chance we have right now of getting this done. Now, as you all know, things change in Congress. Things change a lot in Congress these days. So how we do this work on the 8th may shift. But right now, our focus is direct advocacy with our members of Congress to ask them to make sure that the Afghan Adjustment Act becomes law as part of the continuing resolution. So why we're in Westchester, we're in New York State, right? Why do we have to bother? Our folks are good on this, right? We have regular conversations with our folks, right? Some of them even have staffers that regularly come to these meetings, right? Russ, why are you telling us that we want to take this action? And to be clear, this action is, we're asking for folks to phone bank. So this is 3 short calls to 3 offices, 2 Senate offices, 1 representative office. That's it. It's not hours and hours of training and studying and briefing and then role playing an hour-long meeting, right? We wanted to make the bar for entry low so we could get this in front of as many people as possible and get as many people from our communities as possible involved. We thought simply because this does impact the social action work, right? There's often this division between social action and social justice, but because so much incredible social action work has happened around the Afghans, being able to say to those folks, listen, this impacts your work. This is about the work that we're doing to support those folks. If we want to be able to continue to support them and not have to find, a pro bono attorney to help out with an asylum case, right? This legislation is important. This is an opportunity for you to reach out to the social action side of things and see if those folks want to make some phone calls too. So why in Westchester do we need to still be doing this? So even our champions can be doing more, whether it's public statements, whether it's pushing leadership to make this a priority. There's still more that our folks can do because, as I've said to a few of you and to others folks around the country, if it was important enough, it would be done, right? But it's not done, right? So we need to put a little bit of loving, right? Because I know that some of our folks are really good, but we need to put a little bit of loving pressure on our members, in part because we know that other people are going to be calling them about their issues, right? We have to fight to make sure this gets in the budget and make sure that it stays. And one of the ways to do that is by letting our members know that we want them to make this one of the priorities. And we want them, the more members say to leadership that we want this to be a priority, the less inclined leadership will be to trade it away. Like we heard rumors that the financial aid for Afghans was dangerously close to being traded away during the last continuing resolution, right? So we want to let our members know that we don't want to see that happen with this. And speaking of leaders trading things away, one of your elected officials is pretty darn important in this process, right? There's this guy that lives near me, goes to the same farmers market as I do. Senator Schumer is one of the most important people in government. And as your constituents, as his constituents, and I will say in a year where there's still time for somebody to decide they want to primary him, I think he is very attuned. He is very politically astute and attuned to the priorities of his state. So the more people and the more offices he hears from, the better. And lastly, we want to do this action, as I've highlighted a couple of times, because it directly affects the work that we're already doing with Afghans. If we're able to make it easier for them to stay, it makes it easier for us to support them and help them find a home here. And if they have to go through this complicated process, it's going to feel like we put in a lot of energy towards something that is going to be a lot more challenging to see through. All right, so why phone banking? We thought it was something that everybody can do, right? If you've got a phone, you got a computer or a piece of paper to look at, you can do it. It doesn't require a ton of time. And if you're able to get a bunch of people calling a particular legislative district, you can really raise the level of importance on this issue. I've been a part of some campaigns where we have had people sign up for slots, for timed slots. So people aren't calling, at a particular office at the same time, but they're hearing about the issue throughout the day. And as a former staffer, I can tell you that you hear from 5 or 10 people the same day about something. You're going to tell your chief of staff, you're going to tell your member, hey, you got a number of constituents that care about this. And we're hoping that in the case of Senator Schumer, if we can get people to hit up a few of his constituent offices, that could actually really raise the temperature on this issue. And the last reason that we want to try to do this as a wide action, right? Like as something you're going to spread the word about widely and recruit people for, is it's also an opportunity to build towards Refugee Shabbat and Spring Advocacy. I'm going to talk a little bit about those in a second, much more briefly, but I'm seeing this just like when you think about your year, like I'm thinking about this as a trajectory for the year, right? This is the first opportunity people have to take action. And then if you want to build in some more, more opportunities for folks to learn in your community, you could start with this and then Refugee Shabbat, and then we'll have our Spring Advocacy. So really quickly, how to get ready for the action. You want to spread the word. You want to talk to members of your community. Like I said, social justice team, but also your social action team, your clergy leaders and your colleagues too, see if we can get them on board. Don't worry, they're going to be hearing from us if they're on the HIAS email list already, I promise you that. But hearing from you will help it lodge there that it's something that we want to take action on together. Share it in bulletins and social media if you can is great. But the best thing is actual conversations and individual emails. There are a couple of machers you could hit up that'll help you spread the word. Talk to them and see if they'll help you do it. Email blasts are great as a secondary thing, but just as an organizer, you always want to make sure that you're actually having some conversations with people to make sure they'll do it and they'll help you spread the word. And look out for materials coming from me very soon, including signups. And you can let me and the leaders of WJCI know that you're interested. We want to try to make sure we're getting as many folks as we can. I'm going to try to go super quick on Refugee Shabbat, because I know probably most of you have heard about it already. This year it's March 4th through the 5th. It's a moment to dedicate a Shabbat experience to refugees and asylum seekers. There are lots of different ways to do Refugee Shabbat. It could be around a week of action. It could be a Devar Torah educational moment. It could be an opportunity for you to work in an interfaith manner. It's not just an advocacy focused thing. It's really, designed to be where you are and where you want it to be in terms of expanding your work. And then after Refugee Shabbat, we're going to have our spring advocacy period, which is going to happen around the same time as it did last year in the spring. It might be a little bit before Pesach, or it might be after. depending on a few pieces on our calendar. But I know you guys are no strangers to sit-down meetings with your elected officials. The goal is to keep building those relationships, right? The better relationships that you and as clergy leaders, lay leaders, members of congregations, and members of WJCI, the more relationships that you have, the more likely somebody's going to answer the phone when you call them or answer your email when you email. That's a big part of advocacy too, is relationships. I think that's all I got. I have my email there, and Holly obviously also has it. I don't know if we have time for questions or if I went over.
I think we need to move on, but if anyone has a demanding question, please email Russ. Of course, everyone can always contact me. And we're going to talk about HIAS Shabbat again, about Refugee Shabbat again tonight too. So we're not done talking about your events, Russ. So thank you so much. I want to take one step back because obviously WJCI is an organization that looks at immigration through a Jewish lens. Rabbi Rosenbaum couldn't make it because, of course, rabbis are so busy. We completely understand. And my former rabbi, who I absolutely adore, and a very good friend to WJCI, Rabbi Agdern Yolkut, stepped in like last minute. He's very tuned into immigration issues. I know that. And we're just honored to have him here. I saw you in the on the list, Rabbi, so I would love you to start speaking and give a Devar tour for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I appreciate you reaching out and all the work that you do for many years on this. We find ourselves at a really big moment this week in the Jewish liturgical calendar when we think about the Israelite people who are about to get ready to cross the sea again. And there's something very redemptive about this moment, which really is the word that we could use to talk about the sort of whole story of Exodus. Moses' redemption from the childhood he had, the life he had, until what he became later in his life, the people going from slavery out of slavery, the people in their relationship with God and receiving Torah. But it's this moment as they look behind them and see the army approaching and look in front of them and see the sea that is really the pinnacle of redemption. And when the great Hasidic master, the Sfat Emet, talks about redemption, he talks about it operating on 3 levels. He said, redemption happens where God brings forth those who are imprisoned. It happens where redemption brings forth those who are impoverished. And then redemption happens when God delivers those who are humble. And it's that one that I want to focus on just for a minute, because humility is Moses's great character trait as well. And the Sfat Emet goes on to detail, and he says, the humble are the righteous, who themselves are not really in exile, but they remain there only for the common good, which was the case with Moses. He was prepared for redemption. In essence, he was no longer in exile, but he was there to redeem Israel, which I think is a really remarkable framework to think about Moses. He had no immediate personal need to be redeemed, but he chose to leave the center, to join the margins, to stand with the vulnerable, to experience the role God had chosen for him, precisely in the space in which redemption was so necessary. We don't often think about Moses like that. You know, he had been saved already. He had gone through all of his trials and tribulations to find redemption. But singular redemption isn't enough. It wasn't enough then, it isn't enough now, because as long as the people of Israel were still embroiled in this sort of quagmire of Egypt, and as long as there are still people embroiled in these quagmires in places where they are not safe and are not allowed to find their humanity, Moses couldn't experience redemption, and neither can us, neither can we. And so that's why he chose to stay there, to use his privilege for good. And it's why in the moments before they jump into the sea, when they complain, they cry out to Moses, and Moses turns to God, and God says, don't talk to me. I don't need your words. Go to the people, speak to them, help them through this moment. You're here because you chose to be here, because you understand that they need you. They're out and you are in, so bring them in with you. And anybody who's a power broker operates from that perspective. You can live a life free of burden. You can get what you want. But in those positions, whether you think it happens by happenstance or by divine writ, the best ones recognize something more potent, that they're not as free as long as there are people who are still toiling under oppression. And that's Moses, and that's us. And we are living in precarious times. And for the most part, many of us are operating from within this power structure. But maybe we've been in the margins before, and we've made it to the center. And so we need to remember that privilege that we have. And it comes with a price, because it will all be for naught if we don't use it to look out for the Israelites of the world that are now crying out to us and saying, bring us in. We are on the outs, you are in, help us get out of here. And that very much is the mandate of what we're doing today. And I hope that it can inspire us all to continue to bring redemption to the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. And that was really beautiful. You really brought everything home, and thank you for doing that last minute, truly. I want to now introduce Janet Rowland, Deputy Executive Director from Community Resource Center, CRC. They're based in Mamaroneck, longtime friend of mine in my synagogue and this organization, and so happy to have you here, Janet. And she's being joined here by Bianca Guerrero from the Excluded Workers Fund Coalition, another honor. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you so much, Rabbi, for sharing those thoughtful and powerful words. We need all that powerful energy coming to us, especially now that we're fighting for immigrants and Afghans immigrants coming to our country. Thank you, everyone, and good evening, everyone. As Holly mentioned, I represent the Community Resource Center, formerly Deputy Executive Director. Now I transition into my new role, Director of Advocacy. And with me is my colleague, Bianca Guerrero. Bianca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm the campaign coordinator for the Fund Excluded Workers campaign. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I grew up in Yonkers, so it's good to be with other folks in Westchester.
Thank you so much, Bianca. And we appreciate the time that you're giving us to talk about the Excluded Workers Fund, the campaign that started in 2020 and was carried on to 2021. And now we will talk about our new demands for 2022. So now I will pass it over to Bianca.
Thank you so much, Janet. And we're going to try to keep this to time. So just to set the scene a little bit, when a citizen loses their job, they due to just cause, right, because they got laid off or they were fired, there's a support system in place. Under FDR and after the Great Depression, a brilliant New Yorker that I'm very proud of, named Frances Perkins, who was also labor commissioner at the time, pushed for unemployment insurance to keep workers and their families afloat during economic downturns. Unemployment insurance is a federally funded program that's operated by each individual state. The feds establish the eligibility while the states determine benefit levels and administer the actual program. So if you are paid on the books, your employer contributes an average amount every year in unemployment taxes and for every single worker on their payroll. Unemployment was really critical in 2020. It was really critical during the 2008 crisis, after 9/11, during every economic downturn. But it's also helpful in average times, right? It makes sure that when you lose your job, you're not losing access to all of your livelihood, that there's a safety net in place. Not everyone has access to unemployment insurance. There's a category of excluded workers that we're going to talk about today. And in 2020, given the massive crisis, one excluded worker or one excluded group really came to the forefront, in New York, at least, undocumented workers. Because these workers don't have work authorization or citizenship, they cannot qualify for unemployment, even if their employer is paying those unemployment taxes on their behalf, and if they pay their personal income tax and all that stuff. So I'm going to kick it to Janet just to sort of talk about the origins of the campaign, and then we'll keep going.
Thank you, Bianca. So as Bianca was saying, undocumented immigrants don't have access to not only unemployment benefits, but any other social services provided by the government just because of the lack of immigration status. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, our organization and many organizations in the state and across the country got calls from community members, and those calls didn't stop. The calls for help because domestic workers, construction, restaurant workers, and workers from other industries lost their jobs suddenly, and they didn't have a way to support their families. And so because of the lack of documentation, because of the lack of immigration status, families didn't receive stimulus checks or unemployment benefits, including the pandemic unemployment assistance, because they didn't lack of immigration status, and most of them didn't have a way to feed their families. Undocumented immigrants, they are usually get paid low wages. So most of them don't have savings, and most of them actually suffer very much because they have to deal with the pandemic at home without any support, without any safety net. So they were forced to continue working despite of risking their own life, risking getting sick just to continue supporting their families. Those without support relied on food distributions and community organizations' efforts. I don't know, some of you might have seen the lines at food distribution just to get food home, and also seeking any financial assistance to buy medication, to pay rent and utilities and other essential needs. To add to this, living in survival mode affects the mental health of an individual. So at the center, we heard from head of households, parents experiencing anxiety and depression because of the lack of support. Some of them are still dealing with those effects, with those mental health struggles. So seeing hundreds of thousands of workers suffering because of the lack of support, workers and advocates call for a solution. And the solution was the creation of Excluded Workers Fund. So then those workers have a chance to survival. We knew that the solution wasn't going to be easy. A program that provides financial assistance to undocumented workers didn't exist before. So it took workers and advocates to march on the streets, hold rallies, hunger strikes. Here in Westchester, we marched on the Mario Cuomo Bridge and also in Yonkers, and we held press conferences in various parts of Westchester just to raise awareness and build support. So during the hunger strike, we heard workers sharing their stories and as to how much they suffer without the lack of support. Some were harassed by their landlords with rent payments, and some left their homes because they wanted to avoid retaliation from landlords. They didn't want to be in the radar of ICE, for example, and some of them were illegally evicted. They, out of fear, they just run out, from their homes and move in with family members. So they lost their ability to provide for themselves and their families. So fighting for this fund was the only way to survive. So after holding a hunger strike for 21 days, the fight was over and the workers won a $2.1 billion for this fund. However, we were far from over. The implementation process created another challenge. As I said, there wasn't a model for us to follow, for the government to follow and replicate. So we were faced with a government that didn't possess enough knowledge in terms of how undocumented workers work in our state, or how they get hired or even terminated. So the good thing was that we were able to build a collaborative with the government, and they allowed us to provide input at every phase of this implementation process. The bad thing about this was that the requirements were so strict that it was a really hard advocacy that allowed the workers to be eligible for the highest paid benefit. So now I'm going to kick it over to Bianca.
I would also just add, the program was open for 9 weeks. So organizations had to move very, very quickly, and were inundated with thousands of calls from workers that, they were still hiring staff and all this other stuff to get up and running. The program changed history. We saw models being implemented, or we saw funds pop up in New Jersey, in Johnson County, Iowa. California advocates are fighting for something similar. So we've sort of set the tone for what immigrant workers can achieve and expect from their states. But as Janet mentioned, there were flaws about this program. It wasn't perfect. 75,000 applicants were denied because the DOL ran out of money. We know that 2.1 billion on paper looks like a really big number, but when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of workers, it goes very, very quickly. And this number is just the people who got their applications in, but the money ran out. There's also thousands of workers across the state who never even got the chance to apply because they found out about the program too late or something, or they weren't able to get their documents renewed in time. The dynamics inside of New York City and outside of New York City were also very stark. Upstate in particular, in Long Island, in more rural regions of the state, organizations didn't have enough time to hire staff, to complete sufficient outreach, and to assist workers with applications within that 9-week frame. If you're a worker center serving 3 counties and you only have 2 or 3 staff members, helping thousands of people in 9 weeks is really, really difficult. Additionally, the Excluded Workers Fund ended up absorbing the pitfalls of other programs. So you probably remember in 2020 when Cuomo was like, please stop calling the unemployment service or the unemployment hotline. We're being inundated. And then eventually Google stepped in to help like reform New York City's or New York State's programs. I remember there was a New York Times article about that. A lot of those workers who couldn't get into the unemployment insurance system or couldn't get into the pandemic unemployment assistance program from the feds applied and qualified for this program. So originally we thought it was just going to serve undocumented workers, but the pool of workers it served was a lot greater, meaning again, that 2.1 billion went really quickly. And then lastly, there were policy issues that Hochul and Cuomo did not address, which meant thousands of eligible workers were unable to apply. I'm going to move us forward to talking about what this year looks like, right? What are our 2022 demands? There's two core demands. The first is that Governor Hochul replenish the existing program with $3 billion so we can finish the job. If we don't do this, our neighbors, regardless of their immigration status, but particularly in the undocumented community and the state economy overall, are going to continue suffering from the impact of 2020. They will still have debt. They will still face insecure housing choices. They will not be able to put food on the table, get new school uniforms for their kids, and they'll just lack basic necessities because they're still going to be, again, drowning in debt from the height of the pandemic. On the other side, the existing program is a COVID relief program, but we know unemployment existed before the pandemic and it's going to exist after. We need a permanent alternative to unemployment insurance for excluded workers. So folks who are undocumented, folks who are paid in cash, and people who are self-employed. This legislation we're introducing by the 19th on the state level. It'll be called the Excluded No More legislation. I'm going to kick it to Janet to talk about the political landscape, and then we can plug how this group can get involved.
Thank you, Bianca. So just to remember who was the sponsor of the Excluded Workers Fund legislation, it was Senator Ramos from District 13th. She supported excluded workers from day one, and she sponsored the Excluded Workers Fund legislation. In Westchester, of course, we have our own champions, Senator Shelley Mayer, Senator Harkin, Assembly Member Steve Otis, and Chris Burdick supported the Excluded Workers Fund legislation and spoke in support at marches, rallies, and hunger strike, that we held in our county. Of course, our Senate Majority Leader, Andres Stewart Cousins, she was the one actually to push this effort across the. So thanks to the incredible work of our champions, the Excluded Workers Fund was created. But as Bianca said, the job is not over. This is not done yet. We need something that is much more, that is permanent. As Bianca said, what we got before, the Excluded Workers Fund, it was just a COVID relief because undocumented workers didn't have any access to benefits, any financial benefits to endure the pandemic. So now we're asking for the access to unemployment, something that they should have had before, because they work in our, they support our economy, they work among us, and it is all interconnected. So if some workers have access to unemployment, all workers must have access to that as well. So what we need right now, we need to align, we need help to align more legislators, so then workers really have a chance to have a permanent unemployment. So then when they lose their job, there is a safety net for them to back on. So, so now we have our ask. Our ask is very similar to what Russ was sharing, and thank you for sharing those actions, because it's just something that is not time consuming and that you can do at any moment during the day or in any time at any event. So one of them is mentioning these demands. I don't know, Holly, if you want to show the slide that we prepare and that outlines our actions. So mentioning these demands in any conversation, in any opportunity that you have in meetings with local and state legislators. We can provide talking points, but you can also use the information that you got today. I think the suffering was shared and was everybody was well aware how the undocumented community suffer because of the lack of support. So if you need more help in terms of talking points, you can contact Bianca or myself. We will be happy to provide those. Also, you can sign on letters to state legislators, and you can share those letters with your contacts just to continue building support. You can also participate in actions. As you can see, there is a campaign launch on January 19th, and maybe Bianca can just give us a little bit of sense of how you can plug in on those on that day. You can also be participating in legislative meetings, and if you belong to an organization and your organization want to be in those legislative meetings to provide support, all of those are welcomed. Phone bankings, we will provide those days for phone banking, and also Westchester budget town halls. I think Bianca already have laid out the days for phone banking right here. As I said, we will share our information on the chat, and then you can contact us if you want to support us with this. So that's pretty much our presentation. I don't know, Bianca, if you want to add something else.
I think we're at time.
Awesome. I don't know if anybody have questions.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did someone say something? I think we're running a little late, so we're gonna not take questions for this right now because we want to finish everything. We had a full schedule, but anyone, of course, can email me about this, and I will put you in touch with Janet. And we will send actions for everything that you're hearing about tonight. And also PowerPoints that are being shown will be sent out. So thank you so much, Bianca, and thank you, Janet. Talking about something very important. I want to mention, we're running a little late. Shoshana Akbas from New Neighbors Partnership is an incredible organization that just welcomed, I think, 48 Afghan children to their network. They match newly arrived families with local families. And it's an incredible program because it's all about teaming up with a child who outgrows their clothing and passes it on. They're absolutely lovely. So we're going to bring them back to our next meeting. Right now, I'd like to bring in Laura Lewis, one of our wonderful executive committee members from WJCI, to talk to about 2022 and WJCI. Laura, thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's nice to see people who've been here for many of our meetings and to see some new people. Thank you for coming back, and thank you for coming tonight. So there have been some changes since our last quarterly meeting. And so I thought that given that this is the first meeting of 2022, we should give you a little update as to what's been going on at WJCI. So we've expanded our mission which some of you might have seen from our emails and newsletters. But I thought this would be a good time to clarify what we're doing and what's going on in the immigration space. So our goal is to inspire the Jewish community to come together to support Afghan immigrants, refugees, and asylees. And our attention is currently turned directly towards preventing a humanitarian crisis as a result of the huge evacuation of refugees from Afghanistan. We were tasked by two wonderfully generous donors, UJ Federation of New York and the Shapiro Foundation in Connecticut, to expand Westchester County and its immediate environs capacity to resettle Afghan families, to up our game, so to speak, to match the crisis. So this is over and above the work already being done by wonderful refugees working hard in this space. So we're here to help them and to help groups of local volunteers, primarily but not exclusively based in synagogues, with resources and starter funding to enable the creation of host groups, which will provide critical hands-on direct assistance to Afghan families during this immediate crisis. So we were asked to do this work because you guys showed how deep our outreach is, how broad our network is into all corners of the Jewish community. And our ability to see the refugee crisis through a Jewish lens is very important, as beautifully articulated just now by Rabbi Yolkut. WJCI wants to inspire the entire Jewish community, all denominations and the unaffiliated through JCCs, to put an essential Jewish value into action. WJCI connects our historical understanding of the refugee with providing multiple ways for our community to help today's refugees. We're here as a resource and a matchmaker. Will connect volunteers, both groups and individuals, with a resettlement agency such as HIAS and IRIS, and they will provide the training and ultimately assign a host group, a refugee family needing assistance in or around Westchester. Our model addresses a single synagogue becoming a host group, or a consortium of synagogues and churches and mosques and individuals to leverage financial and volunteer power. We offer matching microgrants up to $5,000, which enables WJCI to provide extra capability to kickstart a potential host group. And our Speakers Bureau is available to speak to congregations about the hands-on experience of resettlement and how they can participate. We're here to help Jewish institutions and others create large-scale special events, such as Refugee Shabbat, which you heard about from HIAS, or an interfaith refugee Seder. So there's lots of possibilities and ways to help. And I'm going to hand you back to Holly, who's going to tell you more about that. Thank you.
Holly, you're on mute.
I know. Thank you so much, Laura. It is very exciting. We even talked to an organization today that wants to do something special for Purim. So just to throw that in, that there's so many wonderful opportunities to tie our celebrations and our holidays to immigration and the current Afghan crisis, and in particular, and so many other things. So stay tuned. Refugee Shabbat is a really important day. As you heard Russ say, it's a day powered by HIAS. It's one that we take very seriously here at WJCI. Last year, we helped around a dozen synagogues book speakers that included Afghan refugees, Syrian refugees, volunteers, and it was quite amazing to see and feel the buzz generated over the course of not only that weekend, but throughout the month. This year, our hope is, given the crisis and where we are, that we bring some kind of observance into all 52 synagogues in Westchester and interfaith communities and we make it something really, really special. So Amy is going to post a link on in the chat box. We have a form you can fill out. We're working on this right now. Many of the people here are joining me on a refugee Shabbat committee, and we're hard at work to get this going, and we've had a lot of interest. So we're very excited about it. So to get involved, please fill out the form. And now I'd like to pass it to Amy. She did just post the link to our website. It's pretty easy to find. We've got Refugee Shabbat all over. And if you can't find it, just give us a buzz at info@wjci.org. And Amy Ecker is going to talk very briefly about social action. And then we're going to bring in Howard to talk about advocacy. Thank you, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Really quickly, as you know, we know many people are, working towards resettling families in the area, but we do much more than that. And we are, as you heard from Janet, Bianca, and Russ, there are a lot of local actions that you can take, as well as different volunteer opportunities. So in our newsletter and on the website, we will be updating local actions, or ACT as we call it, because action changes things. And you will find different opportunities. There's some in Connecticut and around here that you will find, and we will continue to update them. We'll also be planning and helping with Refugee Shabbat and thinking about having a Seder. So if anyone's interested in learning more or wanting to help, plan events, please reach out. You can reach me at amy@wjci.com. And that's it. But we're here, and we want to help you do the work that you're here learning about. So be in touch. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. And I hope that everyone saw our recent newsletter. Amy has been instrumental in building that. And it's a really big change for us. We are making some changes. And so in that newsletter, there is that ACT section that you just heard about. Our events are more prominently highlighted and very organized. And we'll keep adding them there. We'll keep adding them to our site. We just want you all to be involved. And I just want to add that many of you here tonight are involved in refugee work throughout Westchester. So many of you are doing this important work that we are your cheerleader, and we are so glad that you're here. And we're gonna have a few minutes at the end to, if anyone wants to tell us anything that you're doing, that'd be fabulous. Lastly, we have Howard Horowitz just to touch on a few advocacy issues.
Yes, I won't keep everyone long. Thank you, Amy, for that presentation about what we're doing with refugees, and to Bianca and Janet for their presentation about the Excluded Workers Funds, which brings me to, while we're in the midst of this Afghan refugee crisis, where a lot of resources and time and attention needs to be paid, as Laura so eloquently presented to us. Again, we're the Westchester Jewish Council for Immigration, and there are a lot of immigration issues that we're dealing with. I just want to mention two of them, and I will put a couple of links in the chat starting now, hopefully. You'll see in the chat, I put a link to what Congregation Kol Ami is doing to advocate for what's called right to counsel. And this is a very important immigration issue. It's about tenants being evicted during this crisis and ensuring that they have a right to counsel during eviction proceedings. You'll be surprised to find out that you can be evicted for your home without having adequate counsel at your side in court proceedings. That cannot happen to you if you were charged with a criminal offense. That cannot happen to you if it involves children, but it can happen to you if you lose your home. And we can imagine that immigrants, undocumented immigrants, documented immigrants, and all poor tenants are subject to arbitrary court proceedings without counsel. So we're working hard in Westchester County and in New York State to provide legislation to provide right to counsel for eviction from homes. And you can find out more about it at that article about Kol Ami, one of the congregations involved in WJCI, and what they're doing about it. And the second issue involving immigrants, and I'm going to play something in the chat because that's why this hesitation. And that's an article in the forward about a legislation called Fair Pay for Home Care. There's legislation before the New York State Assembly and before the Senate to provide minimum wage and benefits to people who take care of elders and the disabled in their home. You'll find out in this article why that's important. And for the purposes of this meeting, most home care workers are women. Most home care workers are people of color, and most home care workers are immigrants. And this is a fight for wages and benefits to not only benefit them and their families, but to benefit the people that they care for so that they get qualified, trained, well-paid people taking care of them. So please take a look at that article themselves, and hopefully in our follow-up email, we'll provide some links as to how you can get involved with these issues. So thank you, and thank you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Howard. So we do like to end at 9, which we wanted to have more time for discussion. But please, if anyone has anything they want to talk about, any questions, any successes or any concerns, please let us know. I know that a lot of you are busy in this space. Anyone want to ask a question? Say anything? If not, we'll close out.
I want to say thank you for another great meeting, Holly.
Pleasure, Howard. As everything else with this organization, complete collaborative effort. And I want to thank everyone who helped out with tonight and everyone who's here. It really means a lot to us. This is actually really good attendance for a quarterly meeting for WJCI. I think it's the largest we've ever had, right, Howard?
Very nice, yes, excellent.
Yeah, and a lot of new faces. Did someone say
a question in the chat?
Okay.
And the question being addressed is how to get the newsletter so that people will be sure to get the phone bank information and everything else. WJCI.org to go to our homepage, and you can sign up for the newsletter right there, and you'll be sure to get all of these announcements and links once you're receiving the newsletter, and it's very direct.
Thank you so much, Amy Beth. People like Amy Beth just keep everything on track and make sure we include everything and everyone questions. So thank you, Amy Beth. If any of you want to say anything, 2 more minutes. Marty, do you want to say anything?
No, I just like to say Yasher Koach. This has been a beautiful, meaningful, informational, perfectly put together program. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. So yeah, everyone be in touch with us. Let us know. Amy?
I'm just gonna, I don't know. I know some of you were with us for our town hall last week, but if anybody is interested in learning more about convening a group to be a sponsor and joining with HIAS or IRIS, please check out our website also, where you can review the video and learn more about how you can actually relocate and resettle some of the refugees living at Fort Dix.
Is that video from the town hall still available?
It is. It's on the homepage. There is a link directly to it.
And when is your next meeting?
We will send that out tomorrow.
No, I was just curious.
We're gonna put together a list.
In Shoshana's.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I think she'll be fabulous too. We will send that out, and soon we'll send out. We will schedule all the meetings momentarily.
And her information is on our website also.
What?
Her information is included on our website with things to do there as well.
And this was mentioned earlier, but again, if anyone wants any of us to come speak to your your social action committees, your anyone at synagogue that needs information about getting involved in resettlement or anything else, just let us know. And we're doing that a lot right now, talking to committees and people. And so just give us a shout. And I think 9 o'clock on the nose. Rabbi Strom from Congregation B'nai Yisrael requested that once, and we have done it that way ever since.
Thank you very much, Holly, for all
Thank
you
you
and
so
your
much,
group.
Anne. Thank you so much. Everyone have a good night.
You
And
too.
thanks for, we'll send you a follow-up with everything you learned
Okay,
about.
and I'll go online for the newsletter.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Great to see
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Holly.
Russ.
Thanks,
Russ,
everyone.
Oh, Russ, how
Russ,
are
as
you?
always,
Thank
thank you.
you. It was great.
Toda
Russ,
rabah.
Ann.
Toda rabah, Russ.